Okay, hello and welcome to the 183rd meeting of the Acoustical Society of America, coming to you from Nashville, Tennessee. This is the first of two sessions of press conferences that we'll be hosting this afternoon. After we hear from each presenter, we'll have a few minutes from questions. If you're tuning into the live stream, please feel free to put those in the question box. We're going to begin this session with some work in acoustics education. Andrew Piacsek from Central Washington University is going to describe how what I think is a little bit of a spooky and weird recording can inspire and teach students. So, Andy?
Hi, thank you. I'm Andy Piacsek. I'm a professor of physics at Central Washington University. And as Ashley said, the subject area of my presentation is physics education, or more specifically, acoustics education. And the session I'm in is about homework problems that are based on actual data. And so the data that I'm using for this homework problem that I've designed is an audio recording by the composer Alvin Lucier called I Am Sitting in a Room. I'll tell you a little bit about what this is. Alvin records himself speaking into the room. He's actually describing what is happening in the process of this composition. It's about 80 seconds long. He plays back the recording of his speech and records that. He plays that back again and again. Each iteration, the frequencies that are in Mr. Lucier's voice that happen to coincide with the resonance frequencies of the room resonate. They become more pronounced. And by the end of the composition, all you really hear are just the resonant frequencies of the room. I've taken the liberty of editing the 1981 recording to accelerate the process and to illustrate what it is that you're hearing.
I am sitting in a room. 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 I am sitting.
Oh, just need to go to the next slide. So what the students need to do is take a snippet of the recording that I provide them towards the end of the composition and analyze that audio recording and do some calculations, but they can infer the dimensions of the room that Alvin Lucier is sitting in. Among the objectives that the students are getting by doing this assignment, right, they're reinforcing some of the acoustics concepts that they've been learning up to that point, especially those involving standing waves, waves that are trapped between two opposing walls, for example. These waves only occur at certain frequencies that are multiples of some fundamental frequencies, and those multiples we call the harmonic series. They've learned that in the context of flutes and strings, but now they have to apply it to a three-dimensional space, and so now there are three possible fundamental frequencies that they have to work with. They are also practicing their skills in analyzing sound using software. And of course, as always, they're working in small groups, so they're developing cooperative problem-solving skills. It's a bit of a puzzle that they have to do. So there are a few stages to this assignment. They are provided with this audio recording, as shown on the left, and they use software that they've been practicing throughout the term to create this plot that's on the right, called the spectrum plot. It consists of lots of peaks. Each peak corresponds to a particular frequency or a narrow range of frequencies that they have to measure. Those are the resonance frequencies of the room that are in the recording. Now the puzzle comes. They have to assign those frequencies to the harmonic series. Which fundamental are they multiples of? Once they've done that, they can calculate the room dimensions. Then they have to interpret the results. Do those dimensions that they've just calculated actually make sense? So in a nutshell, it could look something like this. They've written down those, they've measured those frequencies, they've labeled them, as you might see here on the plot, and put them into a spreadsheet. That's this column here on the right. Now comes the puzzle part. They have to decide which fundamental is each of those frequencies a multiple of. So there's a bit of trial and error, a bit of logic that goes into this. I'm providing examples of three frequencies that they might settle on: 38 hertz, 51 hertz, and 72 hertz. And for each of those frequencies in their spreadsheet, they can divide that number into each of these frequencies on the left to get a ratio. And if it's a harmonic, that ratio will be close to a whole number. Now, because they're working with actual data, we don't expect them to get perfect ratios, perfect integer numbers. So now some decision making has to happen. There's a little bit of uncertainty. they might say, well, if it's within, say, 3% of an integer number, we'll call that good. So that's what those yellow numbers are in this table here. Those are the ratios that are close to a whole number. And based on that, they can identify and label each peak according to which fundamental it belongs to. And they can have some confidence that these are the right fundamental frequencies. Then comes the calculation. They can plug it into a formula that they've learned to calculate the dimensions of the room. 3 fundamentals, 3 dimensions. We'll convert that to feet to be a little more familiar. And now comes the interpretation part. Do these make sense? This was presumably a living room, as one can learn on the internet that the 1981 recording happened in the living room. So we can look at that. Well, 7.8 feet, that seems reasonable, maybe a little short for a floor to ceiling height, but that's in the ballpark. 14.8 feet, also in the ballpark. 11 feet seems maybe a little short, so perhaps 51 hertz was really the second harmonic and not the fundamental, so cut that in half, double the length, 22 feet maybe seems a little more reasonable. This is the kind of reasoning that the students have to do. So to wrap it up, the skills that the students are applying and learning, right? They're working with actual data, which means they have to make decisions and cope with uncertainties. It's not cut and dried the way a lot of artificial homework problems are. They have to interpret the results that they get at the end, and they have to figure out how to work together to solve this puzzle. So happy to answer any questions.
Well, thanks, Andy. I'll kick us off with a question. So I feel like a lot of science students often do a homework problem and they get a number and then they're like, I'm done with this problem. I imagine that this, having to interpret the size of the room, is particularly helpful for getting them to think about what their number actually means. Is that the case?
Indeed, that is one of the important elements of this assignment, is that it's not just a number at the end. They have to make sense of it. This was an actual room, so if they got a number like 100 feet, obviously maybe that wouldn't make any sense. If they got 3 feet, that wouldn't make any sense. Mm-hmm. So they had to compare those numbers to real life. And I'll mention too that the students working in small groups come back to the class and share the results with the other students, and they have to discuss and decide who did the best job, and then in the end they sort of vote on the best results.
Okay. And so, as kind of extending this, could the students create their own recording from a room of their own and measure its size?
They certainly can. What I demonstrated was what I described was a homework assignment. This could also certainly be a laboratory assignment, and I have done it that way as well, where it could be kind of a project that students take on. There are a lot of steps to that. So it's not a simple 1 or 2 day project. I usually leave it as sort of a term project if they choose to take that on. But a lot of students think that's a lot of fun. They go back to their own living room and they try it out.
Do we have any room questions? Yes, okay.
I've got a quick question. So what do you find, or where do you find students hanging up? What's the most difficult part of the...
Yeah, I had almost a whole other slide on the challenges. It's dealing with the uncertainties. So all of those peaks can seem overwhelming at first, and all those different frequencies that don't seem to fit together. And they can get a little hung up. Like I said, there's a bit of trial and error to decide, okay, I think maybe, and I provide them with some hints about strategies to do this. Like these 4 tall peaks in the beginning that you can see right off the bat, I say, work with those. Those seem to be evenly spaced. Calculate the difference between those peaks. That's 38 hertz, and that's a likely candidate for fundamental. So they pick that one, and then, oh, sure enough, other peaks are also multiples of that. So there are some strategies to doing it, and yeah, if they just kind of attack it randomly, they can spin their wheels trying to do the trial and error part. But this is signal analysis. Yeah.
If they do take it into their own living rooms, how much do couches and curtains and things like that get in the way?
So down here I wrote extra credit. Make sense of those peaks that don't seem to fit, the orphan peaks that don't belong to any of those, that were not multiples. Very few rooms are perfect rectangular boxes with no interruptions in their walls. So features of the room can lead to these other peaks, and that could be a possible explanation. So yeah, there's only so much we can do in terms of working out the details of Alvin Lucier's room. But so when they're doing their own recording, yeah, they should take a photograph of it so that they have an understanding of what they're actually working with, and then they can make sense of their peaks afterwards.
We have one more question from online. So this seems like perhaps this is designed for an introductory class.
This is I can do this at multiple levels. I have done this successfully at the introductory level. If I provide this assignment to a more advanced class, I expect them to, I give them the recording, and they have to work with the recording directly. I don't provide them the nice snippet, for example. I don't provide them with as much guidance as to how to go through the problem. So it can be done at multiple levels, but it does work well in an introductory level class.
Well, great. Thank you, Andy. And we'll be back in a couple minutes with our next presenter.